Hello, folks. Tonight we're doing lesson 51. It's a review session of 5 previous lessons. It's 5 paragraphs long, so we'll read one paragraph at a time, and we'll take it from there. I'll go ahead and read paragraph 1. Nothing I see means anything. The reason this is so is that I see nothing, and nothing has no meaning. It is necessary that I recognize this, that I may learn to see. What I think I see now is taking place of vision. I must let it go by realizing it has no meaning, so that vision may take its place. Okay. So the title is Nothing I See Means Anything. Okay, so when it says I, it means the ego. Nothing the ego sees means anything. And so if you're viewing the world through the ego's lens, you're not seeing things as they truly are. And sentence number 1, the reason this is so is that I see nothing, because nothing the ego sees is truly real, or it's never giving you the true definition of what's really there. It's giving you its distorted, pre-programmed view, and nothing has no meaning. So if you see the world through the ego's lens, it'll never have meaning for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then it is necessary that I recognize this, that I may learn to see. And by learning to see is learning to look at the world through God's eyes, through love's lens, through the vision of Christ, through God's vision. What I think I see now is taking place of that vision. And so your past programming is taking the vision of Christ. It's taking the place of the vision of Christ. It's taking the place of the holy instant. And so what I think I see now through the ego's lens is taking place of the vision that God gave to me, which is the holy instant.
Mm-hmm.
I must let it go by realizing it has no meaning, so that vision can take its place. So I have to recognize that ego's sight is useless for me, so that I can replace it with God's vision. Any comments or questions?
No.
No,
All right. Okay. Would somebody like to read number 2?
I will.
Thank you.
I have given what I see all the meaning it has for me. I have judged everything I look upon, and it is this and only this I see. This is not vision. It is merely an illusion of reality, because my judgments have been made quite apart from reality. I am willing to recognize the lack of validity in my judgments, because I want to see. My judgments have hurt me, and I do not want to see according to them.
Okay. I have given what I see all the meaning that it has for me. Okay. And so when you see it through the ego's lens, like in lesson number 1, it says, I have to remember what it says, but it's just something like this chair is.
Yeah, it's just.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah. This is a review of lesson 1 and 2.
Yeah. So in lesson number 1, it says, this table does not mean anything. And so what it's saying is that you have already given the definition to everything you're seeing. And so when you're reacting in a less than loving way, using the ego's tools and mindset, that's simply a reflection that you already gave the meaning to that thing that it has. And so that's why you react with less than love. It's because you've already defined things as frustrating or deserving of anger or fear-based or anxious. So it's telling you that whenever you use the ego sight, that's not the vision. That's not how you're really supposed to see the world. It's merely an illusion of reality. And so anytime you're not at peace, anytime you're not joyful, you're simply seeing an illusion of reality. Anytime you're frustrated, anxious, fearful, doubtful, shame, guilt, you're simply seeing an illusion of reality. Because my judgments have been made quite apart from reality. Okay. I am willing to recognize the lack of validity in my judgments because I want to see. And so you have to have a little willingness. So because I want to see is because I want to have peace, because I want to be healed. My judgments have hurt me, and I do not want to see according to them. And so if your judgments hurt you, obviously that's not coming from God. That's not coming from love. So any of your judgments that are hurting you or others are not coming from your true source. And in reality, you don't want them. In reality, you don't want frustration or anger or anxiousness. No matter how right the ego says you are to feel them, you don't want to be angry. You don't want to be anxious. You don't want to be fearful. You don't want to feel guilty or shame. You don't want that, no matter what the ego does. Any comments or questions on paragraph 2?
Yeah, the reason nothing means anything is because our ego gives it all the meaning that it has. You can look at a table and somebody will say, "Oh, what a beautiful table." And somebody else will say, "You like that table? That's ugly as hell." It's neither beautiful nor ugly, it's just each person gives it a separate meaning. So that's what it says. I have given what I see all the meaning it has for me.
Yes. And so you can imagine 8 billion universes, definitions of Earth that people think. And so you have these 8 billion people thinking different things from each other. And then they wonder why they feel confused or in conflict and chaos. It's because they have all created their own little universe through the ego. And so a way to release that and heal is to make the conscious decision that your judgments have never really truly healed you or helped you find true peace. Any other comments or questions? Paragraph 2? No? Okay. Would somebody like to read paragraph 3?
Sure, I'll go ahead.
Thank you.
I do not understand anything I see. How could I understand what I see when I have judged it amiss? What I see is the projection of my own errors of thought. I do not understand what I see because it is not understandable. There is no sense in trying to understand it. But there is every reason to let it go and make room for what can be seen and understood and loved. I can exchange what I see now for this merely by being willing to do so. Is not this a better choice than the one I made before?
Okay. I do not understand anything I see. Okay. And so I mean the ego. The ego does not understand anything I see. So when I see the world through the ego's lens, I don't understand anything I'm truly seeing. I don't understand what this is for if I'm viewing the world through the ego's lens. And sentence number 4, I do not understand what I see because it is not understandable. And so you can never truly understand what's going on if you're defining the experience through the ego's lens. And then sentence number 5, there's no sense in trying to understand it. You can define it whichever way you want to, but if it doesn't bring you peace or joy, then you're not truly understanding it. I can exchange, sentence number 7, I can exchange what I see now for this merely by being willing to do so. And so here again, we go to having a little willingness to shift from the ego's mindset to the true vision. Okay. Wendy, you have your hand up?
Yes. Sorry, had to unmute myself. So my question is really, how come the book is very clear talking about ego? And when you read it this way, it makes a lot of sense, that when it refers to I, it's talking about the ego. But why doesn't the book do it as ego? Because then it's confusing if I read this stuff by myself. Because when I think of I don't think of my ego. I think of, my whole self. So unless you explain it to me like this, I don't interpret it that way when I read by myself. So is there a reason that the book does not, because the book usually is like, capital U for this, and if it's talking about God, it makes it a very, capitalizes the word to show you what it's meaning. What is the reason that it, or if why it does, the book itself doesn't make a distinction by saying I, the ego, or just the ego? What is the reason for that? Is it to help us separate ourselves from the concept of the ego?
Mike, you want to take that, or should I take that?
Yeah, when it says I here, the course is not very appropriate for speed reading. You have to really slow down, and I think maybe that's on purpose. You have to slow down and really look at it and what it means. When it talks about I here, is I who I think I am. I think I'm something separate, and I don't identify that with ego. I think this is what I am. And it talks to us in that way. Who I think I am cannot understand this. And then you say, well, why not? And then it's the course is written in a way that forces you to really think about it.
Yeah, and also this is lesson 51, okay? So
Mhm.
usually by the time people read lesson 51, they've already read the whole um, the whole, what do you call the first part?
Yeah.
It's the whole text. And so by the time you've read 650 pages of the text, you kind of get an idea how
Mhm.
how this course is talking about the I, when the course is talking about the I that's aligned with the ego. And remember, this is a mind training. This is kind of like a it's helping you rewire your thinking. And so it's useful to read the text, because if you just read the lessons by themselves first, you might not get the little things like that I thing.
So
But
what is language that's used that means the you that is aligned with God? Like, what is the I
Yeah.
instead of
Yeah.
I? What is it used if it's
Yeah. Either
for that?
either I or you. You have to really pay attention, because there's even some paragraphs in which the word you is used in two different ways within the same paragraph. And that, it requires thinking. It catches like what you've done, like, okay, who is the I? What is it referring to here? There's a line in the course that asks, who is the you that's living in this world? And that's something to think about. The course requires slow reading and looking and thinking. It's not very appropriate for speed reading.
Yes, Will, you have a hand up.
Hi, guys. So what comes up for me is that, what comes up
Your
for me.
your volume or something is a little bit off.
Yeah, we can hardly hear you, Will.
Oh, sorry. Um, okay, I'm gonna try one thing, but if it doesn't work, then interest. Is that better? Is that any better?
A little bit, yeah. Go ahead. Let's try it.
Okay. Oh, sorry. I know what happened. All right. Anyway, what comes up for me is that there's a certain level of compassion in the writing, in the sense that it assumes, right, the book assumes that we're going to be that we're gonna we normally default to level 2 thinking, and in the process of acknowledging our ego that we release these, that illusion, and then we invite the Holy Spirit in to reinterpret all these things. Say that kind of how the way of looking at it.
It was a little difficult to hear what you were saying. Sorry about that. And so
You can put it in the chat.
yeah, well, yeah. The idea of the book is there's an I that you've been programmed to believe that you are, and there's an I who you were created by God to be. And so the what we're trying to do through the book is going from the I that exists in duality to the I that exists in oneness. And so it's the same I, but it's different I's. And so little by little, you start shifting from the I that is aligned to duality to the I that's aligned with the vision of God. And so it doesn't necessarily say this time I'm using I as the ego, or this time I'm using I as your true self. But you can kind of start to recognize it as you read the paragraphs. You can start to, anytime that I is in any way, shape, or form aligned with judgment or any of the ego's tools, frustration, anger, resentment, hatred, jealousy, guilt, shame, any of that, that shows you that the I is aligned with the ego's sight, with the ego's mindset and tools. But when it starts to talk about the I in alignment with the mind of God, then love, compassion, forgiveness, that kind of thing appears. And I wrote a little thing here. Of course, it's in my handwriting, so I might not be able to read it exactly as it is. But let me try to put a little note after this paragraph. It says, "You are frustrated by what you see because you are trying to make truth out of illusions. Trying to understand what is not understandable will frustrate you. Same with your brother. You interact with each other through this not understandable place and end up confused and judgmental, and confusion results. You judge each other guilty for not understanding the understandable in each other." Okay, so you're judging your brother or sister through the ego's lens, right? Which is going to make it impossible for you to truly understand your brother. And then your brother's reacting in an ununderstandable way because he himself is aligned with the ego's mindset. And so you're trying to judge the not understandable and trying to think that it's understandable, if you know what I mean. And if you don't, I understand that you don't understand.
That was quite a lot of wordplay, James.
Yeah, sorry.
I lost you about halfway through.
Okay. Yeah. And anyway, whenever you're trying to define your brother through the ego's mindset, it's going to be it's not going to be understandable to you. You're not going to be seeing what's really there. And so that's not understandable. You're never going to understand your brother if you're looking at him through the ego.
Okay, can I ask one question about that?
Yes.
Is all judgment that is negative judgment, because positive judgment, I assume, would not count. If you say this person's so loving, that can't be looking through the ego, I assume. But if you say this person is so selfish, but I still love her, is that looking through the ego still? If you feel love for the person, but you recognize traits, are you just like, when you're in alignment with God, you no longer recognize anything negative about anybody, even if that's what they're doing?
Yeah, you only see the truth in them as true. You only see the love in them as true. And so you don't define them as anything other than that love. Now that doesn't mean that you have to live with them or date them or whatever. But it's saying there's another way to see your brother or sister. And this is the only way that's going to bring you true peace of mind and true joy, is seeing them as God sees them, not as you've been programmed to see them. The ego is programming you to see this behavior, that behavior as selfish, right? That's the ego, because the ego needs you to judge that brother or sister. Because as you judge that brother or sister, you're judging yourself, unconscious as that may be. And when you judge yourself, you think of yourself as unworthy of a perfect and all loving God. And so if you're unworthy of a perfect, all loving God, then the ego got you through its little trickery of saying you're perfectly right to judge that person as well, whatever. You have every right, the ego would say. But that only deludes who you truly are. And so you never want to buy into that delusion.
So until we are able to completely cast off our judgments of other people, we will always feel unworthy of God.
Yes. Yes.
That's
Because you see, we're all
all.
one. We're all one, right? And so if you're constantly judging yourself, unconsciously judging yourself as guilty in some way, shape, or form, then you're never going to never going to believe that you're one with the all perfect, all loving God.
Yeah, when we look at someone and you see them being somewhat dysfunctional, what the Course saying is that you're looking at their ego. That's not who they are. Now, we may need to deal with somebody's dysfunction physically in this world. You know, if somebody's angry and wants to punch you, well, you don't say, oh, yeah, you get out of the way. Judgment means you don't judge that this is who they are. They're a jerk. They may be acting like a jerk, but you understand that that's a call for love. Their reality. It's not like I don't see dysfunctional behavior in this world. Oh, it's all fine. No, there is dysfunctional behavior in this world. There's hateful behavior in this world. Somebody in New Orleans just drove a truck and killed about 15 people. It's understanding that, yeah, this person is not in his right mind. This person's ego. This person right now is choosing the ego, is choosing hate, is choosing fear. It's becoming a teacher of fear, because that's what a terror is. That's what a terrorist is someone who intends to teach those around them to be fearful. It's a teacher of fear. What the Course says is that that's not his reality. You understand that this person is just caught up in fear of his own, and somehow he thinks that by attacking somebody else, he's going to feel better. There's a line in the Course that talks about the belief that cruelty brings value to our lives. And that's an ego belief. That if I kill a bunch of people, then I feel strong. I feel like powerful. I'm doing God's work. What the Course says is understanding that that's a mistake about who he is. He's lost. He's not being sane at this time. And what he's doing is a call for love. It's a dysfunctional call for love. There's many dysfunctional calls for love. Alcoholism is a dysfunctional call for love. It's saying, that I think there's something wrong with me, but if I get drunk, then I'll feel okay about myself. The alcohol make me, drown my sorrows. Okay, judgment means that you understand that dysfunctional behavior, that hateful behavior, that behavior of spreading fear, it's a call for love. Now, a call for love doesn't mean that you say, oh, okay, I understand. You killed about 15 people, but that's okay. No, it's not okay. It's not okay. But you understand that person is just somebody who's in pain, and it's a dysfunctional call for love. And if there's some way you can stop it, the most loving thing somebody could have done for that person is to stop him from committing what he did. That would have been a loving thing towards him.
Yeah, like we talked about before, the guy who killed a bunch of people in the church and how the people in the church forgave him. The KKK guy, I guess,
Yeah.
and so they were able to see through the delusion. And it wasn't. It didn't mean that they didn't put him in jail. Yeah.
No, you know, in this world, maybe that's a good thing for him to recognize that, you know, to be able to recognize the results of our actions. If I do this, I may end up in jail.
So when we die, does the the spirit, you know, rejoins and go? Well, it never left, but it
You know what the Course says? You know what
what
the Course says?
what?
There is no death.
Yeah, because this is all illusory. But I guess
Because
what
this
I'm
is all
asking,
illusory.
does the ego die when the body dies, and then the only thing left is what we started with, which is our completeness with God? Does the ego go?
There is no ego to die. The ego is just a mistake. It's a crazy thought in our heads. There is no ego. The Course talks about as if there is something out there called the ego, which is different from what you really are. But all the ego is a false belief in our head.
Yeah, esoterically, if you study near-death experiences, they always tell you that when you end up and go to heaven, you have this kind of like life review, okay? And in this life review, you see how you interacted with others. But not only do you see how they felt when you interacted with others, but you can now feel what they felt as you were interacting with them. And so by feeling how they felt, you have a more of an understanding of why they reacted or behaved in that manner. And when you have that true understanding, then you have true forgiveness. And then when you have true forgiveness, and the ego is let go, is released, it doesn't affect you any longer, because the forgiveness released you from the delusion. And so you can say yes, when you return to heaven, you will have. I would imagine you will have no ego, but there's a process that goes before that.
So the ego is kind of like a fever or an illness
That's right.
on us
Yes.
that covers up, like when you feel sick, you don't act like
Yes.
yourself, you don't feel like yourself, you don't feel good. So is
Yes.
that a good analogy, that it's like an illness?
That's a good analogy. It's just an illness.
Yes.
They're, you know, it's just a dysfunctional thought in our heads. So that's all the ego is.
So do the people who have been practicing, James, you and Mike, for decades, do you see yourself, when you think of the I, when you think about yourself, do you see yourself as distinct from the ego? Do you see it as sort of like a thing that's there but not you
Yeah.
Exactly.
all the time?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. All the time. You see, when you have peace in regards to your behavior, to your thinking, you know you are being the true you that God created you to be. And when you're not being that loving self, that peaceful, joyful self, then you know you're just buying into some past programming that you're putting placing over the whole.
Hmm.
Because once you're in the course, and once you do this for a long time, you practice coming back into the holy instant as many times as you can, and you know you're in the holy instant because you're peaceful, because you're loving, because you're compassionate, because you're forgiving. And so that's when you're in the holy instant. And anytime you're not, that simply means that the ego for a moment in time is taking control over your thoughts. And all you have to do is recognize that and come back to center, come back to love through the act of forgiveness.
Do you forgive the ego for its misperceptions?
Yeah, you forgive yourself for your misperceptions, and you forgive your brothers and sisters for whatever you think the ego thinks they did to you. And yeah, you forgive.
Well, there is no ego to forgive.
I mean,
We forgive ourselves for thinking that. There is no ego to forgive. We forgive ourselves for thinking that that's what we are.
Yeah, it's kind of like waking up from a dream kind of thing. And so you're only love, and we all of us are only love. It's just when we have allowed through our past programming the ego take control of our thinking that we forget that. And the course says that forgetting is just a way to remember better.
Hmm.
And so there's no need to judge yourself for being in alignment with the ego's mindset. It's just the practice of recognizing when the ego's in control of your thinking and then taking back control of your thinking from the ego. And you do that over and over again. And after a while, you decide to answer a call for love with love. And you see everything as love or a call for love. And the only response to a call for love is love. And so,
Yeah, and the course talks about the ego as if it is something other than us because it is helpful in this world. As if the ego was something. The ego is just a mistake that we made. There is no ego. But in this world, it's helpful to think of the ego as some kind of entity that's not us.
yes.
And what the course does is deal with this world. There's a line in it that says this course remains within the ego framework where it is needed. So it talks about as if there were separations. We're separate from the ego. There is no ego. We just made a mistake. A mistake's for correction. That's all.
Yes. Would somebody like to read number 4? Okay, I'll go ahead and read number 4.
I can read if you can hear me. Can you hear me now?
Yes, 100% better. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
awesome.
much better.
Okay, give me 1 second. All right, number 4. These thoughts do not mean anything. The thoughts of which I am aware do not mean anything because I am trying to think about God. What I
Think-
call
Think
Without God.
what?
trying to-
Without God.
Oh, well, because I'm trying to think without God. What I call my thoughts are not my real thoughts. My real thoughts are the thoughts I think with God. I am not aware of them because I have made my thoughts to take their place. I am willing to recognize what my thoughts do not mean any. I am willing to recognize that my thoughts do not mean anything and to let them go. I choose to have them be replaced by what they were intended to replace. My thoughts are meaningless, but all creation lies in the thoughts I think with God.
Okay, before we go into this paragraph, do you want to repeat what you wanted to say before? I wasn't really heard that well.
Oh, sure. I was just saying, and you don't need to comment, I guess. I don't want to like slow it down. But
That's fine.
basically, like from the first, it was based off, I guess, the earlier conversation. The inspiration that I get from this reading and the book in general is that, there's a level of compassion, and in recognizing that as we're reading this, we're not reading this necessarily from a level 1, or because we would be perfect in that point. Like we're reading this from the perspective of the ego because it is through the process of releasing the concept of the illusion that we're usually bound to by default. It's in that process then we can invite the Holy Spirit in to see things the way that they truly are. So I feel like, for me, like what I get from it is that there's a compassionate recognition that we are by nature human, and because we're human, we're often going to be bound, initially default to that egoic viewpoint. So that was what I was trying to say.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, if you look at this paragraph, what the ego is a meaningless thought.
Yes, in sentence, actually, it's sentence 1, 2, and 3, and 4, because it's pretty interesting. The thoughts of which I'm aware of do not mean anything because I'm trying to think without God. Okay, I'm thinking out of alignment with the mind of God. What I call my thoughts are not really my thoughts, my real thoughts. And so you have thoughts that you've been programmed to believe are your thoughts, but they're not really yours. They're just programs that you've been taught as true fantasies, that you've been taught as nonfiction. My real thoughts are the thoughts I think with God. And so your only real thoughts are those you think with God, those whose expressions come from the energy of love. Those are your only real thoughts. And he says, I'm not aware of them because I have made my thoughts to take their place. And so you've replaced the holy instant with your past programming. You replace the vision of God with the ego's sight. And then I am willing, this is the little willingness in sentence number 6, I am willing to recognize my thoughts do not mean anything and to let them go. And how do you let them go? Through the act of forgiveness. By recognizing that those thoughts that are not aligned with love are not my thoughts. They're not my real thoughts. They're just thoughts that I've been taught to believe and use. And then sentence number 7, I choose to have them be replaced, again, the little willingness, by what they were intended to replace. My thoughts are meaningless, but all creation lies in the thoughts I think with God. And so that's what you want to make your practice. You want to make your practice the most possible is to try to use love to define your experience. Look at your experience through the lens of love. Practice seeing your experience only through the lens of love. And if you're not experiencing if you're not seeing the world through the lens of love, then you're not really seeing what God is trying to offer you. You're only seeing a fairy tale with the ego that's programming you to believe that it's true. And that's only going to create conflict and chaos and confusion. And so if you want to replace your conflict, chaos, and confusion with peace of mind and joy, then have the little willingness and choose to define all your experiences and all your brothers and sisters' actions through the lens of love. It's always a choice we make. Do we choose the lens of love or do we choose the lens of the ego? It's basically main energy source is judgment.
James,
Yes.
when you have dreams, are the dreams either ego or God?
When you have actual dreams,
Yeah. I guess does the ego create them or are real things happening in them? I'm asking because my sister had a dream and my mom was in it, and she's been dead for 26 years. And what is that?
well, it depends. Sometimes they're dreams and sometimes they're actual experiences in the spirit form. And so sometimes you're taken or they bring you people or people come to you and you're in the spirit form. You leave the body and are in the spirit form and are able to communicate with others. Or sometimes they're just dreams. But when it comes to seeing your mom, if she had a message for you or something, it was probably an experience. It's probably she came to your sister and talked to her about X or Y, gave her some advice or something.
Wendy, I was gonna this is like this like the whole concept of dream or dream state is what I was mentioning to you yesterday, which is the where a lot of the work that Joe Dispenza does, because it's all about the unconscious mind. So like for me, like I am fascinated by this topic because yes, like James said, like we can be channeling messages or receiving messages in our dreams. But a lot of times, I'll just speak for myself, you know, like one of the things that I've been working assiduously on for the last 3 months is really trying to become aware of childhood traumas and self-limiting beliefs and old programs of unworthiness that are running in the background, which in the unconscious mind, usually when I sleep, because, you know, it doesn't like it's not enough, you know, and this is obviously based off of Joe Dispenza and Bruce Lipton and a lot of that stuff, but they, you know, they say it's not enough to say I am prosperous, you know, in your conscious state, or I am love in your conscious state if you have childhood traumas and self-limiting beliefs in your unconscious mind that are keeping you from fully, you know, from fully living a prosperity mindset or things like that. It's I know this is kind of outside of Course in Miracles, but it's very complementary in the sense that, like, you know, that sense of oneness, that sense of, you know, level one, like you know, like one of the things that I've been really focusing on is trying to not only bring that into my conscious state, you know, of choosing to be, you know, to release the illusion, but also trying to bring that, you know, into the unconscious state.
Well, how does the Holy Spirit heal us in our dreams then? If we're not conscious and cannot, you know, make a choice in our dreams to align ourselves with love or to align ourselves with the mind of God, because when you're sleeping, your subconscious is what's driving all of that. How does does the book, I'm sorry, because I haven't read the whole book, but does the course talk about healing that comes to us when we are not, you know, we use the term asleep to mean we're asleep to God in our waking day. But the real sleep that we have at night is there spiritual healing that occurs, and how would we you know, because I Will was talking to me about this yesterday, that, you know, if your whole unconscious mind is running on these programs, you know, you're making progress consciously, but how would you ever be able to clear that shit out? I'm sorry, James, garbage out. I'm gonna try to be helpful to you and not do that. How would you clear all of that out if you don't have control while you're asleep? How does the Holy Spirit come to you in your sleep, if that happens at all? And how do you prepare your mind for healing in your sleep?
Well, you always
There's
prepare.
a
Oh,
go ahead.
go ahead. Go ahead, Mike.
There's a place in the course that it talks about a dream within a dream. The value of a dream is to help us become aware of what we're holding in our subconscious. It's to, you know, help us look inside, you know, and be aware of what we're holding.
Yeah, and something I always try to do is before you go to bed, you get on your knees and you pray and you ask God to help heal you in your dreams and to use you while your body sleeps. And so I ask God, God, can you please use my soul to help others heal, or can you please use my soul to help myself heal too? And so you go into your sleep state with a prayer, with a recognition that now you're in God's hands. When you're asleep, you're in God's hands. Even though when you're awake, you're in God's hands too. But when you're asleep, you're definitely in God's hands. So you want to place your soul in God's hands and ask for your soul to be useful while you sleep. Please, God, make me useful, and please also, because sometimes there's a lot happens when that happens, and so say, please, God, also make sure to well, not make sure, but please, God, when I awaken, please make sure that I had enough sleep time so that I can be truly
Yeah,
energetic.
I have to get going, guys.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Hi, Mike. Thank you.
I'm like,
Bye.
Thanks.
See you tomorrow,
Bye.
Mike. Okay. And so, yes, go into pray before you go to sleep and ask God to use your soul not only to heal yourself, but to heal others, and ask the Holy Spirit to guide you in your dreams. And when you do so, it's gonna be interesting. Because if you go to your sleep state unconscious or thinking about the negativity or whatever that happened that day, what kind of experience do you think you're gonna have? You know, if you go into sleep stressed out or anxious or worried, what kind of experience do you think you're gonna have? I mean, what road are you going to take when you go to sleep? And so set the road for your dream state. And yes, even if you set the road, maybe you're going to have unpleasant dreams, let's say, but that's also a form of detoxing. So if you have an unpleasant dream, the ego would say, oh, you played and you had an unpleasant dream, it didn't work out. Okay, that's the ego. No matter what you dreamt about, no matter if the ego defines it as good or bad, in the morning, be grateful for whatever it is that you dreamt or did not dream. Be grateful for even the so-called nightmares, because in some way, shape, or form, God is always in control. And so God is always leading you towards your own healing. And so that dream that the ego said was negative, maybe it was a way to detox yourself from some emotion you had the previous day or the previous month or whatever. And so before you go to sleep, set your intention. And when you awaken, again, get on your knees and be grateful to God for the night that you had. Would be what I would recommend.
You, James?
All right, would somebody like to read number 5?
Can I just ask a quick question?
Yes.
I know I mentioned this before, James, but why does the ego want us to always be separate? Like, does it not recognize that? I guess it doesn't want to recognize, obviously, but there's so much strength in thinking with God, and yet we default to wanting to always be separate because the ego wants us to be separate. So why does the ego insist on us being separate? I guess that's because that's where it has power, right?
Yes, because the ego has placed itself in seeming opposition to God. So the ego thinks that it's God, it is against source. And so either source has you or the ego has you. And if you go with source, then the ego existence ends. And so the ego is always trying to defend itself through some form of judgment or fear, because that's the only way that it keeps you attached to its mindset. Because if you detach from its mindset and see everything as a gift from God to you, then you don't need the ego, and the ego slowly dissolves away. And so the ego does this not to for anything other than to allow itself to survive. It's a survival instinct for the ego. Judgment, fear, anger, resentment, frustration, hatred, any of those emotions are just a way for the ego to survive and thrive through you.
Yeah. Okay.
And so you don't have to punish yourself for when you find yourself in alignment with the ego. All you have to do is recognize when the ego is in control of my mind. Okay, learn to recognize and practice recognizing when the ego is in control of your mind, and then forgiving it and letting it go.
Well, and punishing oneself is also a factor of the ego, right? It's like the same trap. It's another trap that it lays for you. Yeah, it's fascinating and frustrating at the same time.
Yeah, this is what the ego does. The ego judges you, and then it judges you for judging others. So the ego says judge, and then it judges you when you have judged. And
Madness.
yeah, that's a little ego's game. And so you don't have to punish yourself for that. You just have to recognize it. Listen, I've been paying attention to my ego for the last 4 or 5 decades. And the Course says the ego, that's why the ego answers first and loudest, because that's become our go-to response. And so this book is about shifting our go-to response from the ego's mindset, from duality to oneness, to aligning your mind with the mind of God, your thoughts with loving thoughts, and becoming the light of the world that God created you to be. And what the ego doesn't know is that the more you get to practice recognizing, the more it has control over you, but gives you the opportunity to practice taking back control, then the ego becomes kind of like a self-destructive mechanism. Because the more you recognize when the ego is in control of your mind, and the more you practice letting it go, the less time you will spend aligned to the ego. And then the more time you will spend one with the source.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So you know how the book says that anything the ego makes to harm, the Holy Spirit can make to heal.
Yes.
So does the Holy Spirit make the ego to heal?
Yes. Yes. The ego, because we have past misperceptions, and I guess they let's say okay, let's say the ego's control of your mind. You become angry, right? And so you become angry over and over again, but sooner or later you'll become sick and tired of that anger, right? So you become sick and tired of thinking in alignment with the ego. And so the Holy Spirit allows that to happen so that you sooner or later see that this hitting yourself against the wall is not a good idea. This anger is not really useful. And so the ego uses even those anger responses to help you realize that you don't want the anger response. And so the Holy Spirit is using all your experiences to help you heal, even what the ego thinks it's part of it. And so the ego doesn't know that the Holy Spirit is using it to dissolve itself, but it's allowing you to experience the ego for you to recognize this is not taking me to a place of peace. And so yes, this is a little gamemanship there.
Thank you.
Yes. Last paragraph 5. I am never upset for the reason I think. I am never upset for the reason I think because I am constantly trying to justify my thoughts, aka my past programming, aka the ego's thoughts. I am constantly trying to make them true, constantly trying to make the false true. I make all these things my enemies so that my anger, there you go, is justified and my attacks are warranted. I have not realized how much I have misused everything I see by assigning this role to it. I have done this to defend a thought system, there you go, that has hurt me, and that I no longer want. I am willing to let it go. And so that's exactly what we talked about just now. Is I have done this to defend my thought system, to defend the ego thought system that has hurt me. And so anytime, no matter when you use the ego's thought system, the only thing that it does is hurt you and hurt those around you. But now you're starting to realize this is not what I want. I am willing to let it go. And so in sentence number 4, I make all things my enemies. I judge all things, basically. So that my anger, the CRAP that I have inside of me, is justified. And my attacks are warranted. And so those things out there have to be your enemy. You have to judge those things. Why? Because you're holding this stuff inside of you. And so you project it out into the world. But what the ego doesn't know is that the more you project this out into the world, the more you see that this stuff here is something that you don't want, the less you'll want to use it. Any comments or questions in the last paragraph? No? Okay. Okay. I think that's basically it then. And I'll just read the five paragraph, the titles of the 5 paragraphs again. Nothing I see means anything. Paragraph 2, I have given what I see all the meaning it has for me. Paragraph 3, I do not understand anything I see. Paragraph number 4, these thoughts do not mean anything. And paragraph 5, I'm never upset for the reason I think.
I find I'm fascinated by I feel like I need to I should put cue cards somewhere on my fridge or something to remind myself of why the ego wants to keep me in suffering because it's so good, right? Like these are like it's so easy to forget and but like because I really like this state, the one what was it? I make all things my enemies so that my anger is justified and attack my attacks are warranted. So basically like the ego sees everything as a battleground, right? And so like it just wants to keep me in a battleground, fighting, and perceiving threats and that I have to defend against. And and it's just, yeah. And I think, I feel like it's like know thy enemy, right? It's like kind of like, I don't know if you know the book, The Art of War by Lao Tzu, you
Yeah.
know, and it's like the ego really, it's like the more we understand the ego and why, and its tricks, its tactics, and why it wants to act, the better we are to be able to catch it when it starts to, do its thing.
Yes, exactly. So, yes, it is an exhausting way of existing when you're bowing down to the ego. But just practice remembering, because anytime the ego tries to have you believe X, right? And then it has you judge yourself for believing X. And but what the ego doesn't know is that sooner or later you're gonna get sick and tired of believing what the ego is trying to sell you. Sooner or later you're gonna stop buying its swamplands. And so don't punish yourself for thinking in alignment with the ego. That's the primary thought right now. Is don't punish yourself when you're aligned with the ego and its thinking. Just recognize it. And just recognize you don't belong there. I do not belong aligned with the ego's thoughts. I do not belong supporting thoughts of anger, frustration, resentment, hatred, guilt, shame, fear, anxiousness, doubt, or worry. That's not what I'm here for. That's not what God created me to be or share. And so just recognize when you're somewhere out of alignment with the mind of God, when you're somewhere within your heart and mind where you do not belong. Catch yourself, stop that line of thinking. Stop putting your time, focus, and energy into what is hurting you and those around you. Forgive your misperception of them and of yourself, and let it go, and come back to center, come back to peace, and now choose to see the same experience, but now place love's lens in front of you, and now define the experience through love's lens. And the more you do so, the more you shift from unconsciousness to consciousness, from the ego to love, the more you realize that it is in love where you belong, aligned with love where you belong, not with the ego. And so it's all okay. It's all leading you to a place where you belong. It's all helping you realize who you truly are and who you are not. And then when you become clear on that, then you help become a light for others. You help others go from a place of judgment to forgiveness, from a place of fear to a place of peace. And that's what we did. And with that being said, 7:59. As you all know, I don't get paid overtime by the Course in Miracles. So we shall end the class here. And thank you very much for coming. And maybe I'll see some of you in tomorrow's class with Christina, if she has the class.
Thank you, James.
Thank you, James.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you,
Happy
Will. Thank you, Wendy. And thank you, Isabel.
Do you have any New Year's advice?
The last hour. Whatever I said in the last hour, that's my advice.